Happy Monday, Dog Nation. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We are smashed and loaded on today's program, whether it be previewing the national championship game tonight, some news involving one of Georgia's final pieces of the 2021 class, potentially. Terry and Arnold will cover that on today's program. Georgia gets some more good news about players coming back. We'll address some of that. John Stinchcomb going to be here as well, but I want to begin today's show by looking at the latest, at least the best that I understand, involving transfer portal tight end, the former five-star recruiter Arik Gilbert. We will lead off today's show with that, and we are so glad that you are with us. DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
One of the things we've been really clear about is that we're really big fans of Arik Gilbert around here. That was true back when he was a recruit. I really wanted him to go to Georgia. He chose to go to LSU instead, and once it was rumored and then become official that Arik Gilbert was going to be in the transfer portal, we made no bones about the fact that we would love for Arik Gilbert to be at Georgia. I just think he's a really special player. I think the sky's the limit for what he might be able to do during his college career, and goodness knows, as a Georgia fan, I'd love for him to be doing that at Georgia. So with that in mind, I kind of got some responses, at least for those who didn't get their Twitter account canceled over the weekend, that folks asking, hey, did you hear Arik Gilbert might be going to Florida? In some cases, it wasn't even might be going to Florida. It was Arik Gilbert, bad news, BA. He's going to those lousy, stinking Gators. Hate to break this to you, but Arik Gilbert's going to be there at Florida, and he very well might be. But I had to kind of go digging around and kind of see where the genesis of all of this was. And I guess the place where all of this kind of starts is with a guy named Mike Farrell, who is a longtime recruiting reporter for Rivals, put out on Twitter a link to a TikTok video. Are you following me on all of this? Where he was relaying some information, not quite that yet on that, please, but he was relaying some information about just exactly, kind of what he had been hearing about Arik Gilbert going to Florida and, kind of exactly what was going on with that. Can we hear Mike Farrell on this, talking about what he had heard about Arik Gilbert to Florida? Let's take a listen to this.
Somebody, a source close to the Florida Gators, told me I was stupid for not thinking that he's a done deal to Florida. Who am I talking about? Arik Gilbert, the five-star tight end who went to LSU, is now in the transfer portal. Lots of rumors about Georgia, initial rumors about Tennessee, but that's a dumpster fire right now. And this person who called me stupid said it's pretty much a done deal that Gilbert's going to Florida. So, I'm stupid. I don't know. This source is also extremely optimistic about stuff. But it would make sense with Kyle Pitts, it's a good fit for him if this does happen. But Georgia fans don't believe this is going to happen, and I don't know if it's true or not.
Fair to point out what Farrell says there at the end. This is not an emphatic report on his part. He's just relaying through social media what he had heard from someone in Florida. That was enough for a lot of people to take it and run with it. But Farrell there says, I don't know what's going to happen or not. I'm just telling you what someone has told me. And he even expresses some suspicion about the nature of his source's information, even during that clip, which was taken from a TikTok video that Farrell did. Well, even since then, Farrell has probably backed off of this report a little bit more. Let me show you what Farrell has tweeted here. I think this is going back to yesterday. The recruiting reporter from Rival saying, for those asking, I have no freaking clue where Arik Gilbert is going. I don't think anyone does, Farrell says, just passing along what I have heard. So I'm not telling you that Gilbert's not going to end up at Florida. I guess anything is possible, and Arik does not seem to be all that open about his process. Even going back to Thursday's show, someone in Terrence Edwards, who's been a mentor to Gilbert and who actually dined with him within the few days prior to that interview, even Terrence said, listen, I'm not even sure where he's going. So Arik Gilbert's keeping this pretty close to the vest right now, but the notion that the Farrell report from Rivals indicates that Gilbert's going to Florida, I think Farrell himself is saying, no, don't take me at face value on that, or at least don't take my reporting on this to suggest this is a done deal, no matter what folks in Gainesville might be saying. And by the way, it is kind of interesting how this story involving Gilbert does kind of weave into the narrative of everything else that's been going on at Florida. Dan Mullen, supposedly a candidate for NFL jobs. Remember, we've had Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport, a lot of folks like that, talking about that. We even had a TV reporter say that she had heard that Mullen was going to interview for the New York Jets coaching opening. That was later kind of shoved aside. And in fact, some people have kind of even gone so far as to report that while Mullen is apparently a NFL candidate, so to speak, no one has actually asked permission from Florida Athletic Director Scott Strickland to interview Mullen, which my understanding is by NFL rule would have to take place for Mullen to be involved in any NFL coaching interview. So any of that kind of stuff you can kind of also put in the category of maybe the reporting on that was a little bit premature. Then there's the Matt Hayes, veteran, longtime college football reporter from Saturday Down South a few days ago, on the notion that Florida, the administration, the folks inside the building there in Gainesville were upset with Mullen based on some of the things that he said this year, based on how the season kind of ended. And Hayes went so far as to say that he wasn't even sure that Mullen would be back in Florida in 2021 because of the feeling that people in Gainesville had about him. So there are a lot of rumors connected to Florida right now. And here's the one thing we know. Florida being upset with Mullen and wishing he was gone, Mullen, wanting to go to the NFL, Arik Gilbert coming to Florida, the idea that all three of those rumors could be true at the same time, it just seems unlikely. In the kind of ecosystem of news, all three of those things can't quite be true at the same time. So you can kind of add whatever's going on with Gilbert to the very weird scenario around whatever's going on with Dan Mullen at Florida. By the way, we'll have more on the Gators before we're done on today's show. Now, let me say this on the Georgia side of this. Georgia obviously can't officially comment on anything related to Arik Gilbert because, listen, unlike some other programs on college football, Georgia's not openly tampering with players who have been on someone else's roster. But we do have an indication, at least, inquiring minds would probably be led to believe that if there was a chance for Georgia to get Gilbert, they would probably look to do that, especially given how hard Georgia recruited him the first time around. And the closest we have to any kind of statement from Georgia about Gilbert is the kind of cryptic message that Kirby Smart delivered after the game against Missouri the other day, where he talked about the value of tight ends. So in light of Gilbert being on the open market, we can't know exactly for sure the way that Georgia feels about him, but Smart's words from a few weeks ago at least probably give us a pretty good clue. Let me let you hear Kirby.
You can never have enough good tight ends in the SEC because they're big, they're athletic, they can catch the ball. There's so many things they can do. So it's one of those things that we want as many as we can get, and we want to get them the ball.
So when you listen to that, it leads you to believe that Georgia's probably interested in being in Arik Gilbert's recruitment, involved in this, and it also probably leads you to believe, based on some of the stuff that the Rivals reporter is saying there, that the notion that it's not going to happen for Georgia and that Florida's already swooped in and won this thing, that reporting may have been just a little bit premature. Let me shift gears here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and talk about something completely different for a moment. This was kind of a big deal at the end of our broadcast on Friday when we were video only and taking some comments, something that apparently Dan Patrick, the longtime sports broadcaster, said on his radio show. I want to show you a tweet here from Andrew Perloff. Perloff is one of Patrick's producers, and this is really the tweet that kind of gets the whole firestorm started. I don't know how many people were actually listening to Patrick when he said this, but a lot of folks on Twitter saw Perloff's tweet quoting what his boss had said on the radio. This is Andrew Perloff on Twitter saying that Dan says that he's heard from a source that Tennessee football will face a serious investigation. We already know that's true. We've talked about that on the show the last couple of days, and frankly, the investigation seems to be coming from inside the house. It seems to be Tennessee who's pushing the investigation, which is kind of a weird thing in and of itself, but we'll have more on that later on the show. But Perloff goes on to say that Patrick also said that Georgia could be next. And here's the quote that's kind of been heard around the world. I was told Georgia got sloppy in recruiting, according to the legendary Dan Patrick. Now listen, as someone in my early 40s, I'm a child of the 90s, and I grew up with Dan Patrick, Keith Olbermann on SportsCenter. I'm a big fan of Dan Patrick's, but let's be very honest here for a moment. When it comes to what Dan Patrick's sources have been saying about college football over the course of the last few months, there is plenty that Patrick has gotten wrong. Go back and look at some of the Big Ten stuff related to their return to football, and you can see evidence of that. So this tweet alone is not enough for me to take it seriously at all. But what I do take seriously is Georgia's very fast and aggressive response to all of this, not to let that rumor from Dan Patrick and what Patrick's producer had put on Twitter, not to let that just sort of hang dangling. Georgia wanted to get out in front of this, and I think it's a pretty good job here. Let me show you the official response from Georgia to the Dan Patrick rumor. Georgia says, while we do not comment on alleged NCAA investigations at other institutions, there you go, Tennessee, that's my addition, by the way, Georgia goes on to say, we have no information to suggest there is any validity to the reports related to our football program. So I think most people probably assume this was true anyway. The Patrick thing just had the whiff of being, someone's wishful thinking, not Dan Patrick's. I don't think he's anti-Georgia. Whoever told him what they told him is probably anti-Georgian. It had the whiff of wishful thinking there. But either way, it's nice for Georgia to let folks know, listen, we're not going to be pushed around. Whatever problem Tennessee has and whatever they may be trying to do to get rid of their football coach, Jeremy Pruitt, and I believe that's exactly what's going on there, Georgia says we're not going to be caught up in any of this. And the idea that Georgia and Kirby Smart, when's the last time you saw Kirby Smart do anything in a, as Patrick used the word, sloppy nature, whether it be relating to the media, how he handles his business? You can say what you want about Kirby Smart, and he, like everybody else, is imperfect, but the notion that somehow Smart gets sloppy and somehow doesn't have all his I's dotted and his T's crossed, I'd love to see some examples of that, because I'm not really seeing a lot of evidence of that. That, as much as anything else, made the story from Dan Patrick sound fairly unbelievable. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia. It's great to have you with us, no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, or the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Rev, and as a podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just really happy to have you with us here today, and a big thanks to our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia for making it all possible. Pella can help equip your house with energy-efficient windows and doors. That's a great thing to be able to do with them, because let's face it, when you got the heat on like you do right now, you want that staying inside your house. You don't want it escaping outside. Inefficient windows and doors, and Pella's going to help you prevent that there as well. They've also got great savings for you at the moment. Through February 18th, you can get $150 off windows, $350 off doors, or 0% APR for 36 months. Incredible savings. Great way to get in touch is reaching out to them at their website right now. That's PellaBranch.com. PellaBranch.com. That'll get you in touch with Pella Window and Door of Georgia. They are viewed to be the best. We'll get John Stinchcomb here coming up in a moment. There's a lot I'm going to talk to John about. We'll get a bit of a preview of the national championship game from him. Georgia also got some good news this week related to some players coming back. More names to add to the list, like Kyrus Jackson, Justin Schaefer. We'll talk to John about that a little bit more. But let me do this for a quick minute before we get there. So yesterday, I thought there was a very interesting theme to the NFL playoff games, the Super Wildcard Weekend. I thought that a couple of the games yesterday, you saw the same storyline kind of pop up over and over again. There was the decision by Tennessee Titans coach Mike Vrabel to punt while trailing from inside his own, 45-yard line late in the game, completely lambasted by Titans fans and media for that decision. Then Pittsburgh Steelers coach Mike Tomlin, maybe worse, punting in the first half while down 28-0, and then late in the game also kind of a surrender punt that I would say justifiably brought about a lot of criticism from Steelers fans and media. And it kind of reminds you of the crosshairs that Georgia coach Kirby Smart found himself in when he also made a controversial decision to punt at the end of the Cincinnati Bowl game a couple of Fridays ago. Now listen, I mentioned before that I think Kirby Smart is a very buttoned up and professional coach, but no one's perfect. This is an area in which I would say that Smart is probably imperfect, but I would also say that most coaches kind of fall prey to the same kind of stuff as the NFL playoffs showed you yesterday. The decision to be as aggressive as you need to be is just a tough choice to make. Smart, in that bowl game against Cincinnati, erred, I guess is the word I'm looking for here. Smart himself even admitted that. And what's weird is that All of this came on the heels of a decision a couple of months ago when Smart chose to be very aggressive in a game, going for it on fourth down at the end of the half, going for it on fourth down in the first half in his own territory, and Smart vehemently defended his decisions there on that at the time. By the way, we're around the doghouse here, assisted by our friends at AAA. Let me let you hear Kirby Smart from the Tennessee game. Since fourth downs are kind of the topic of the moment, this is Smart defending himself on being aggressive on fourth down, going back to the Tennessee game a couple of months ago. Here is Kirby.
If you don't go for it on 4th and 1 at the goal, what are you telling your team? I mean, really, that decision was made long ago. So 4th and inside the 1 on the last play of the half, that decision was made for me probably 20 years ago. It's just who I am, what I believe, and philosophically, I don't really care what the score is. That's just what I believe.
So that's Smart saying, hey, listen, I'm going to be aggressive. That's what I was taught to be decades ago, and that's what I'm going to do. And then when was kind of pressed on that even more by reporters, kind of doubled down on that whole notion of this is who I believe that we as a program need to be. Here is Kirby again.
You look at 4th and 1 as appetite as risk. I don't. I look at it as law of percentages say you're going to make more than you don't. And that's disappointing we didn't. I'm probably more frustrated with the other one, the first one there, where we tried to hard count them and draw them off and didn't get it. But I still feel like with our offensive line, we should be able to get a foot.
So that's Kirby Smart explaining why he did that. And yeah, as I said before, punting inside his 45 while trailing against Cincinnati in the fourth quarter, then using a timeout to do so. When Smart was questioned about that the other day, said, yeah, I probably agree with you, saying that's not something that he probably thinks he should do. So what's the real takeaway here? Whether you're Mike Vrabel, the coach of the Titans, who made a mistake yesterday, Mike Tomlin, the coach of the Steelers, who made a couple against the Browns last night, or Kirby Smart, who even himself has admitted he made a mistake against Cincinnati. Here's the thing that I think you would probably take from this. If you were a coach in a big game facing a decision about whether or not you should punt, then you probably shouldn't punt. If going for it on fourth down is even an option, you should probably go ahead and go for it, especially if you're Kirby Smart, which you don't have in the NFL, which is the huge talent advantage that Kirby Smart typically enjoys against almost any team that he plays. I think that gives Smart the opportunity, if not the obligation, to be aggressive. Now, luckily against Cincinnati, it didn't really cost UGA, but when you think about what you want coaching, decisions to be, it's the answers that Smart gave after the Tennessee game that seem a lot more fitting for a program like Georgia than the careful conservative choice to punt the ball while trailing in the fourth quarter against Tennessee. You saw this, I should say against Cincinnati. You saw this show up in the NFL playoffs a couple times yesterday. It showed up for Georgia a couple of weeks ago. Georgia is at its best when it's aggressive. NFL coaches are at their smartest when they're aggressive too. But in the heat of the moment, that is not always a very easy decision for some to make. It's Around the Doghouse. It's assisted today by our friends at AAA. Boy, really thankful to have AAA as a part of the program. I said this the other day that, we've had to make use of AAA a couple times here lately. Calling them to help us when a car breaks down. It seems like my family, we have a lot of cars breaking down here and there. But nonetheless, AAA shows up and does good work for us. They also can help you with great savings as well. AAA membership really pays for itself pretty fast. One of the ways in which that's true is with the AAA Savings Hackback. It's a combination of benefits. It's worth more than $1,000, featuring free career assistance, identity theft protection, up to 85% off prescriptions, and discounts in food and essentials while you're on the road and traveling. It's a part of every AAA membership. So to find out more, make sure you check out this website. It's AAA.com/go savings. That's AAA.com/go savings. It is a very busy show around here today. We're trying to take care of a bunch of business, so let's keep it rolling right now. Great voice, smart guy, talking some Georgia Bulldogs. Let's talk to the former UGA All-American, John Stinchcomb.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We will say hello to John Stinchcomb here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia Today. Great to have him as a part of the program. Great to talk about everything related to UGA. John, hope you had a great weekend, and it's certainly great to have you here as a part of the show here today.
I had an awesome weekend, and it was filled with a lot of football, and it still hasn't stopped. I look forward to tonight's game as well.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool thing. I think that for a lot of folks, and as a former player, maybe you don't think about this quite the same way that I do, but I would dare say that wild card weekend is the best weekend of the NFL playoffs. I think it's better than the Super Bowl. I think it's better than the conference championship games. I think it may even be better than the divisional round, because you do get, unfortunately, a lot of blowouts in a traditional divisional round where the bye teams are playing at home after a week off. But those wild card weekends, a lot of times you get some pretty good games. And so for my money, this is what we just experienced leading into a national championship game tonight. This may be the single best weekend of NFL football on the entire calendar.
Well, I certainly enjoyed it. I know there was a number of games that didn't turn out exactly how I thought. I'm thinking about the Rams and obviously the Browns. Those games particularly were exciting as the lower-rated team ended up pulling it out. But it makes for fun football, and I think geared me up for tonight's game as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I want to talk to you about Bama and Ohio State before we're done, because I think that's a good one that's on tap. But let me bring you in on a discussion I was just having. The decision by Mike Vrabel to punt while trailing in the fourth quarter yesterday, the decision by Mike Tomlin to what was kind of called on Twitter a couple times as kind of a surrender punt while trailing 28-0 the first half, and then again late in the game, kind of brought back to mind for me the little bit of criticism that Kirby took after punting while trailing in the fourth quarter inside the 45 against Cincinnati the other day in the Peach Bowl. Now, ultimately for Georgia, it ended up working out, but I do think it kind of highlights the challenge that coaches face in the moment when they're the guy in charge on the sideline to be as aggressive as you have the opportunity to be, or maybe in some cases as aggressive as you need to be when it comes to really rolling the dice and going forward on fourth down. Vrabel and Tomlin took a bunch of heat yesterday. Kirby wasn't immune to that criticism going back a couple of weeks ago himself.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, hindsight's 20/20, right? You make the right call, as Georgia did in the Cincinnati game, and you seem to have a little bit of reprieve, whereas if it doesn't pan out for you, immediately clock management is the first thing that comes out of any person's mouth as to why their coach is so far off. I think back to the days of Les Miles and LSU and the bashing that he continually took for his quote-unquote clock management. And really what it boils down to is your efficiency and decision-making when it comes to those situations on fourth down. So in both those, really all three of those scenarios that played out the past few weeks, I think fans are saying, why not be more aggressive? You see what the situation is. And the coach realizes that when you make those sorts of aggressive decisions, you're putting all your eggs in that single basket, that if you don't convert, then you're not giving yourself any other chances. Whereas, in Georgia's case, they felt like their defense had been dominant most of the game, and specifically in that second half, and you could, quote-unquote, take the risk of punting and giving your opponent one more opportunity against you. But I think it's knowing what you've got in the stable, what your team is about, how you're built, and making that decision based situation to situation. I think in overall, coaches should probably be more aggressive than what they currently are, just because of the ways that offenses can find success.
Yeah.
I think the game is set up more now to where 3-4 yards is a lot easier to come by than it was 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. In Kirby's case, it works out in the Peach Bowl the other day. Georgia gets the big defensive stop, by Tyreek Stevenson that kind of, helps all that take place. But the truth is, I hate to say it this way, but Georgia was probably a little bit lucky that the decision not to go for it on fourth down didn't hurt them more so than it did, because, that was your chance to keep a drive alive. You chose not to do so, but it seems risky at the time if you're the guy that's actually in charge of making that decision.
Yes, and, it panned out really well, right? But if it didn't, that's the first thing, the one single play that people are going to point to and ask questions about. They still had questions for Coach Smart. Why did you make that decision? And I think you could at least justify a little bit because Georgia's defense had been so dominant in that game. But you're not leaving a huge margin for error. And late in those games, important games, there really isn't. There isn't that large margin that anyone would want. to have in those situations. You got to make a difficult decision and know that you're going to be critiqued for it, no matter how it turns out. So, I think in Georgia's case, it's a little more justifiable just because of the dominance of the defense. But overall, if you're looking for an approach and a mindset, I think more teams have to be aggressive in those scenarios and recognize that there's better opportunity to succeed and have it turn out your way than vice versa. I think offenses are just so much more proficient, and overall, if you give up that one chance to tilt the playing field back in your favor, that's something that more teams regret more often than not.
Boy, there's been a lot of good news for Georgia lately, John, in terms of players returning, whether it be Jordan Davis near the end of last week, Justin Schaefer, Kyrus Jackson kind of added into that list. Obviously, going back a few days ago, and the truth is I can't remember if we talked about this or not, JT Daniels and guys like, James Cook, Devontae Wyatt, all pledging their return to Georgia for 2021. If you're a UGA fan, the theme of unfinished business and these guys focused on a big, in most cases will be a final season at Georgia. I think that's a pretty exciting things for UGA fans to see the momentum that's building here at the beginning of 2021 for what's going to come on later on this fall.
I love it. I think across the board, those are pretty wise decisions. Jordan Davis would be the sole candidate of the list of guys, in my opinion, that you could almost justify if he were to have opted out and chosen to move on to the draft. But, man, am I grateful that he's coming back. He's a real difference maker that I don't know how many rosters out there have a guy like Jordan Davis, just the space eater. And when you're using a 3-4 defense and you have that one single nose in between the guard, center, guard space, he better be full grown, and Jordan Davis has checked that box for Georgia for these past few years, and to know that he's coming back should really boost the entire team's performance. But you see the difference that he makes when he's on the field. Now, for the rest of these guys, I think it's really important for Georgia to maintain their core group, and when you have Kyrus Jackson and Justin Schaefer and guys that probably recognize there's more opportunity on a personal level for them to go out and prove more. Devontae Wyatt's another one. JT Daniels, same way. I mean, he's had a good performance, but not a complete body of work that he's wanting to present. So for selfish reasons, it seems like a wise decision, but from our seats as Georgia fans, that's super encouraging. I love the fact that these guys are saying, I value my time at Georgia, and our work is not done. There's more opportunity here, and I want to be a part of it.
So let me kind of go a little bit deeper with you on this. Let's say you're an offensive tackle, John, and you're facing a 3-4 defense like Georgia's with Davis there in the middle, knowing that he's occupying multiple blockers on many plays. How does that make your job, trying to block one of these outside linebackers? How does that make your job more difficult, knowing that Davis is occupying so much space and so many offensive line bodies there in the middle? As an offensive tackle, does a guy like Davis make your job more difficult because of what you're left to face?
Yes, because it changes. Really, we're talking primarily about the run game. If there's an area where Jordan Davis can improve, it would be in his pass rush, and I think he took a step forward this past year in that regard. But how does he make his hay? What's his bread and butter? It's just devouring space in the run game. It's hard to run inside. So what are they forced to do? They're forced to try outside the tackle or even wider plays just because there's no space in the middle. So defenses recognize that. The personnel can take that extra 6 inches a little bit wider if you're a defensive end or an outside linebacker, just for different leverage points, knowing that Jordan Davis is creating such havoc in the middle. It also frees up those middle linebackers to flow over the top and come downhill when it's inside run a little bit harder, just because of the special opportunities that Jordan Davis presents for his compatriots out there, which makes it harder on the rest of the offensive line. I think you go into a game, run game plan all week knowing that it's going to be difficult to move 99. So how else can we create space in the run game? And that's probably a gap or two wider just to kind of get away from him. So it puts more of the onus on the tackles. It tries to stress different parts of the defense. But I think when coordinators recognize what they've got in the middle, it frees them up to do more things off the edges, knowing that you've got this in first three gaps kind of taken care of.
I want to squeeze in one more thing. I want to ask about the national championship game before we're done, and I apologize to our production staff for asking a question that's not a part of our rundown because we have no fancy graphic for this. But Georgia also, since we've last spoken, has announced Josh Brooks as its new athletic director. John, you're on the athletic board, so you're a big stakeholder when it comes to university. What did you think of the hire of Brooks? What do you think Brooks brings to the table for UGA?
I am a big proponent of Josh Brooks. I'm a fan of his. I've known him for a number of years, and the capacity that he has filled at the University of Georgia before he left to be the athletic director at Millsaps. He's also a personal friend. I should just go ahead and throw that out there, so I'm a little bit biased. But what I like about this hire is it's someone who has been in the position before, and most importantly, he's familiar with Georgia. I think that the landscape of college athletics is ever changing. The name, image, and likeness issue that's coming to the forefront, the changing landscape of college basketball and football, with the various rules and the transfers and the one and done type scenarios. There's a lot going on. Not to mention managing these 9-figure budgets.
Yeah.
In a pandemic landscape. I mean, it is quite the challenge, unique challenges, and to have someone that's got intimate knowledge and work beside Greg McGarity in the capacity that Josh Brooks has, I think is invaluable. I also know and have spoken with him personally about some of his vision and ideas of what he would do. This was prior to McGarity's retirement, and it's inspiring. I like the fact that he knows what fans want. I think that's important to him, and I think that's important to all of us, is recognizing that there's big decisions and little decisions. And another piece that I think is really important is the athletic department at the University of Georgia is very strong. The staff there, I'm thinking Derice and Magdy and Will. I mean, there's a number of folks that are high flyers, and it's a complete staff. So I don't think we're going to take that step back or have that transition period in what's a vital time for any athletic department during this pandemic, and with so many big ticket items on the table. If we had an outsider come in and try to fill that role, even that may have had more Power 5 experience or been the senior athletic director at another program, there's still that lead time of learning the University of Georgia that I think we get to bypass because of Josh Brooks' background.
So, national championship game tonight. Georgia fans are obviously not excited about seeing two other teams other than themselves in the game, but admittedly, Alabama, Ohio State's a pretty big showdown here. What do you expect to take place in Miami between these two teams?
Yeah, I will be shocked if Alabama isn't. I hate to use the word dominant, but what is a better word?
Right. Yeah.
I respect Ohio State. Their performance against Clemson was inspiring, but I think Alabama plays it at another level. And now that you can kind of sit back and critique Clemson a little more, maybe they didn't have the roster that everyone thought they might have had, or the team composite. Their big win was against Notre Dame. We just saw what Alabama did to them a week or so ago, and you think, man, Alabama's performance all season has been some really good, inspired football, and they've got arguably the most talent of any roster in college sports right now. So it's going to be tough to slow down this Alabama offense, and I'm excited about it because there's just it's a culmination of a season that was difficult at times, but was able to come through, and we actually get a national championship where we weren't even certain that we were going to have a season. So I'm excited about watching Justin Fields on the big stage. I wish it was in a different shade of red, if you will, but should be a good game.
Yeah, here's my thing on Ohio State, that I don't know, as well as they played against Clemson, they played a great game. If you watch the other games, and you didn't have to spend much time watching because they didn't play very many of them, but I don't believe that Ohio State played as well against anybody as they did against Clemson really all season long. Trey Sermon was unbelievable against Clemson on the ground, but I don't know that we saw that version of him a lot during the regular season. This is not an Ohio State defense that has a Chase Young the way that we're kind of used to seeing. Ohio State's obviously a very good team, no one can dispute that, but I don't know how easily Ohio State can replicate what they did against Clemson, and you have to play at least that well to even have a chance against Alabama.
Wow, great analysis, because it was by far, you go back and watch the few games that they played, and it almost looked like two different teams.
Yeah.
The proficiency at which Ohio State was performing on offense, I mean, they hit every possible shot that they took. Justin Fields was playing lights out, as was his complimentary staff out there. I mean, Trey Sermon, I like the way that guy runs, but early on in the season, that's not the way he was running the football. So they truly played their best game on the biggest stage, and it'll be interesting to see whether that's a staple that they can rely on tonight, or was it just one of those performances that you go, man, we were playing lights out. But like you say, they're going to need that and more against Alabama. I mean, Alabama, I think, is clearly the number one team in the country coming into this game, and they continue to prove it week in and week out.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. John, thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia today. I'll look forward to speaking to you again very soon. I appreciate your analysis and all things Georgia and college football, and hope you have a great week. I'll look forward to talking to you next week at the same time.
Likewise, BA. Go Dogs.
Good stuff.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, I think John said some really good stuff about the national championship game there. I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. Let me also remind you, you're getting ready to get involved in tonight's game, or, enjoyed the pro football yesterday, heading towards the divisional round this weekend. What makes it more fun is to have a little action down on the game, and no better place to go to for that action than my friends at MyBookie. When you use the promo code DawgNation, you even get a big deposit bonus, up to 50% added back into your account. That means you put $1,000 in, they're going to give you $500 back. That means you start off with $1,500 there in your account, assuming you do it the way I just described. That's more money than you started with. You're already a winner before you even place your first bet. It's what MyBookie's known for. The best player perks in the industry. It's winning season. It heads right into the playoffs and the championship game tonight, so get involved with MyBookie, but you've got to use the promo code DawgNation to get the big deposit bonus. That's all one word, spelled the way it's supposed to be, D-A-W-G. Use the promo code DawgNation. Find MyBookie online. Just type it in your browser. The internet will do work for you. Then use the promo code DawgNation. After that, you play. You win, you get paid. So, yeah, national championship game. I just think the Ohio State that we saw against Clemson, give all credit to them, but, how many times do we see that version of Ohio State during the season? And replicating that, and by the way, I'm going to give huge credit to Justin Fields here, who I thought was amazing in that game against Clemson. But doing that, playing at that level against any opponent for 2 consecutive weeks is just really, really difficult. Against Alabama, it may be just an impossibility. But let me give you a counter to this point just for a moment. And this is something that I do think could be interesting when you think about the Alabama tonight. In the history of Nick Saban in championship games and kind of everything that goes along with that, think about the quarterbacks that Nick Saban teams have usually beat in these championships. It wasn't Colt McCoy against Texas back in 2009. McCoy got injured right at the beginning of the game. It ended up being Arik Gilbert for that. When it was LSU after the 2011 season, it was Jordan Jefferson, the quarterback there in that spot at that time. You got freshman quarterback Jake Fromm in 2017, who probably wasn't as good then as he would become in 2018. A lot of times these Alabama national championships have been obtained against less than great quarterbacks. But the moments in which Alabama has had to face a truly great quarterback in the championship game, think about Deshaun Watson in 2015, then again in 2016. Think about Trevor Lawrence in 2018. I just gave you 3 instances. Alabama lost twice in those 3 instances I just described. It's not true to say they've never beaten a great quarterback in a championship game. They did beat Deshaun Watson at the end of the 2015 season, but great quarterbacks have at times given Alabama trouble in these national championship games. I would say that Justin Fields can play tonight for a chance to be in that great quarterback category, and maybe he can challenge and threaten Alabama the way that Lawrence did after 2018 and the way that Deshaun Watson did 2 consecutive years in 2015 and 2016. Just something to keep in mind. I'll also say this, that I know there has been some chatter about Jalen Waddle's involvement in tonight's game. That's one of those things, I'll believe it when I see it, and I don't expect to see it. Here's the rule that I'm operating on from now on. If there's any rumor, report, suggestion that a guy might be hurt, or in Waddle's case, might still be hurt, my assumption is that he's probably hurt. We have all of this gamesmanship that goes on. Will a guy play? Will a guy not play? When injured players play, they are just typically not at their highest level. They're not, capable of doing what we're used to them being able to do. So Waddle will be in uniform. Waddle will go through warm-ups. Waddle may be on the field for some plays. But the Jalen Waddle that Georgia fans, for instance, saw during October, that guy is not available for Alabama tonight. I think it's important we start thinking about injury situations that way. All right, let me roll through a number of other SEC stories. And when it's kind of a busy weekend to recap here, Terrion Arnold, the very good remaining prospect for the 2021 class that Georgia is in the mix for, he announced his final top 3 here over the weekend. Georgia, as you might expect, is a part of that. Florida, as you might expect, also there as well. And Alabama is included on this list, too. One of the things I think remains to be seen when it comes to Arnold's recruitment, at one point in time it was thought that maybe Florida might be heavily in the mix here, but Florida's made some coaching changes as of late. Todd Grantham is coming back as defensive coordinator, as you probably know by now, but Ron English and Torian Gray, the duo that coached defensive backs before, they're both gone. How does that impact Arnold's recruitment? I can say I don't know, but it's certainly weird to jettison your defensive backs before a guy like Arnold makes his final decision. Florida did announce a coaching hire over the weekend. Wesley McGriff is coming in to work with defensive backs. I don't believe it's been announced yet, or if it has, I'm not aware. If McGriff is going to be kind of a cornerbacks or safeties coach, or if he's going to have the secondary to himself. Florida had split up those duties with its most recent staff. McGriff is coming over from Auburn, so well-respected guy, thought to be a good recruiter. We'll see if McGriff can kind of step in here and help things go with Arnold, but it is a top 3 heading for a February decision for Terrion Arnold there, with Georgia, Florida, and Alabama in the mix. By the way, speaking of Auburn, there have been a lot of things happening there on the Plains as of late. First of all, Tank Bigsby, the running back, who at one point in time we kind of talked about some rumors of maybe he might enter the transfer portal. It is now official, I guess, that he's not. Bigsby said on social media that he's looking forward to being back at Auburn again next year. But a guy who is on his way out the door is Big Cat Bryant, who really has had a good Auburn career, maybe better in 2019 than he turned out to be in 2020, but that was true maybe for a lot of Auburn guys. And obviously maybe Big Cat had a hard time with a defense that no longer included Derek Brown. But, Big Cat's still a big-time player, and it's a big blow to Auburn that he is moving on, but he is leaving that program. So Brian Harsin will not have a key name defensively that he thought that he would have, as Big Cat is on his way out of Auburn. By the way, I guess it's also announced this week that Cadillac Williams is returning as Auburn's running backs coach to kind of keep the Auburn theme going here for a moment. So maybe that brings an end to any kind of Dell McGee rumor. McGee's obviously an Auburn alumnus. There have been some rumors that he might be looking to go back home, but I guess the Cadillac return might end that. Boy, it's been a rough go there for Shane Beamer at South Carolina. Obviously, you had the high-profile hire of Mike Bobo, retaining him, and bringing in guys like Will Friend and it looked like that Beamer was on his way to putting together a really good staff. Then Auburn swoops in and poaches both Friend and Bobo. You're forced to hire an offensive coordinator that really very few people know anything about. You do take him from the Joe Brady staff there, the Carolina Panthers, but this was not a guy high up on that coaching ranks. He was an offensive line assistant with the Panthers. He's now play caller, it would appear, for South Carolina next season. You have to go to Western Kentucky, I should say, for your defensive coordinator. Also not a very well-known name. Certainly some rumors of the weekend that Brent Key, the former Alabama offensive line coach, who's now at Georgia Tech, may have turned down a chance to go take that same job there at South Carolina. A couple things here. First of all, on the basis of the hires that Carolina's making right now, I think it greatly diminishes the chance that Shane Beamer can have enough early success to put him on any kind of solid footing in future years. I think the Beamer administration has really been dinged by some of the stuff that's gone on over the course of the last couple of weeks. And if you want to compare this to another guy who was not a coordinator, who was hired as a head coach last year, Sam Pittman taking the Arkansas job, and the great success he had bringing in Kendall Browse as offensive coordinator, Barry Odom as his defensive coordinator, and really putting together a big-time staff. Seeing the struggles of Shane Beamer at South Carolina, I think, ought to prove the fact that what Pittman did a year ago to Arkansas was nowhere near as easy as he made it look. So some trouble here for Beamer there with his South Carolina staff. Probably something to keep your eye on. Marcus Freeman, the Cincinnati defensive coordinator that Georgia fans got to know really well, he also made some news over the weekend, apparently turning down a chance to go to LSU to take the same job at Notre Dame. So what does this say for LSU? They weren't able to win the battle against Notre Dame for what I think is a really good defensive coordinator. There's obviously been some, kind of behind the scenes turmoil there in Baton Rouge related to some of the reports that are out there about sexual assault allegations and things like that. And just generally speaking, a lot of player movement away from LSU and not a very good team on the field this year. So Freeman rebuffing LSU's advances here. Does that say something about how LSU's viewed right now within coaching ranks? I'm not quite so sure, but it's probably not the news that LSU fans wanted to get. And then finally there's this. We talked a little bit about the Tennessee Amarius Mims stuff off the top of the program. It now seems fairly obvious what Tennessee's doing here. We've been a little slow to want to just describe it for what exactly it is. But it seems like Tennessee is using this NCAA stuff as a way to get rid of a coach, apparently, that it no longer wants, in Jeremy Pruitt. There was another report in the Knoxville News-Sentinel over the weekend that the key lawyers that are leading the Tennessee investigation is one guy who's making like $500 an hour, at least $500 billable hour, another guy billing at $350 an hour. I mean, Tennessee's paying big bucks to the attorneys here to get deep into all of this. Seems like you don't spend that kind of money on attorneys unless you have a hopeful outcome in mind. So one way or another, it certainly appears that the Jeremy Pruitt era at Tennessee may be coming to an end soon, and Tennessee may be using the specter of this NCAA investigation and what may or may not have happened with Amarius Mims as a way to get rid of the coach and maybe get a reduced buyout along the way. So we'll make that your SEC through. I'll also say quickly here, not a good day for Georgia basketball on the weekend, losing really in ugly fashion to Arkansas. Not really much you can say to sugarcoat that. That was not a good day for Georgia basketball. We'll certainly wish them well when they get back out there again, but that was not a good day. What was much happier, and we're going to do this as part of our Gator Hater roll call here today, giving out our golden shoe. Couple guys over the weekend that I want to honor here. First of all, Harris English. Great job by English, winning on the PGA Tour, the calendar year season opener for the PGA Tour at the beautiful Tournament of Champions in Maui. A little bit different kind of tournament this year because it wasn't just tournament winners, which is typically the case, but the weird 2020 made this tournament have to change a little bit. But English, the former dog, gets the win there. Also, big thanks to, or I should say big honor for Nick Chubb, leading the Cleveland Browns to a playoff victory over the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Chubb and English, you are our golden shoe winners for today. We'll see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down, air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. You can trust R.S. Andrews to do all of that for you. They certainly take good care of us. Heating system, you're worried it's not going to make its way through the winter that's still yet to come? Well, get the peace of mind you need online at rsandrews.com. All right, couple of comments here. I guess we'll go Facebook first. I think I was on YouTube to start on Friday. Let's go Facebook first here. We'll get some comments, and we'll get you going here on Willie Gray Jr. says the Lady Dogs beat Florida. That's a good job. Good job by Joni Taylor's team there. Trey Duke says it's a disrespect to Nick Chubb to give him the golden shoe. That is absolutely not true, Trey. Absolutely not true. Cameron Logan says I missed the top of the show on the Rick Gilbert stuff. So Rivals reporter had kind of put it out there that maybe Gilbert might go to Florida based on what a source told him. He now says he doesn't know where Gilbert's going, so maybe a little bit of a jump of the gun on the idea that Gilbert was going to Florida. Chase Barbie says, I said to start the show that Florida getting Gilbert might have been premature. Chase says, when was the last time Florida did anything or said anything that didn't turn out to be a little premature? That's probably well said. Jacob O'Neill says Bama by about 17 tonight. I could see that. Nick Stitt says score prediction for tonight. I'll go a little less than 17. Let me say somewhere in the neighborhood of 13 or 14 points. I think Alabama's going to score because they score against everybody. So let's say something in the neighborhood of like 35-21, 35-23, somewhere in that neighborhood. I do think Alabama wins fairly comfortably, and I think they score some points to do so. Matt Rukavina says if Tennessee wants Pruitt out now, they must have a replacement waiting, right? That's a very good question because this would be very late in the year to be firing your head coach or moving on from your head coach if you didn't have somebody in mind. And obviously Hugh Freeze would make a lot of sense. Maybe Freeze wants the Tennessee job. Maybe Tennessee wants Freeze. Maybe that's what all of this is really about. They feel like they can get a better coach. And, I've kind of defended Pruitt a little bit. I think that Pruitt can be a good coach eventually. But if you gave me the choice of Hugh Freeze or Jeremy Pruitt, I'd obviously want Hugh Freeze. I know people say, what about the, stuff in, Freeze rearview mirror, some of the personal failings. Obviously, character is destiny, that if you're a person that doesn't take your own character seriously, you're going to fall, and you're going to, in some cases, fall dramatically. But when that happens, sometimes people do put their life back together, and sometimes people do learn lessons from their faults and their mistakes. And who am I to say that Hugh Freeze couldn't be one of those people? This notion that Freeze should never be able to coach at a high level again because of the personal failings he's had in the past, that's not what I'm quite sure I want life to be. I want guys to have a chance to basically be rehabilitated and learn from their mistakes and kind of get back out there again. I'm generally speaking for second chances. I wouldn't mind, Freeze getting a second chance. And if he has figured out some of the demons that may have haunted his past, if he's figured some of that kind of stuff out, then he could be a very, very formidable coach anywhere. Jeff Ingram says, still curious about that show cause. To be honest with you, Jeff, I'm not even really sure what that even really means in practical terms. I mean, Auburn hired Bruce Pearl. Florida's got a supposed show cause right now. But I'm in practical, pragmatic terms, I'm not even really sure what that even really means. Kevin Cook says the Falcons could pick Zach Wilson at quarterback. Obviously, Wilson and Fields are going to get a lot of comparisons between each other. I mean, Wilson's one of the quarterbacks that's out there that I wouldn't mind seeing Atlanta get. Like, a guy that I don't want Atlanta to get is Trey Lance. I watched the game that Lance played, earlier this season, kind of the showcase game, and I honestly didn't see what all the fuss was about. So Wilson I like. Obviously, Fields for Atlanta I would love. But someone like Lance I've just got no interest in. Lucy Bowers-Boykin says Bama's D doesn't impress me. Yeah, I mean, it's not a great Alabama defense right now. Troy Sadowski, by the way, the great former Georgia tight end, weighing in to say, I can't understand if he chooses Florida over Georgia. Our tight ends are rarely targeted, even involved in the offensive game plan. The Peach Bowl was the most involvement I've seen in years. So that's a great former All-American tight end weighing in on the tight end situation right there for why someone like Gilbert might choose Florida over Georgia. And I understand where Troy's coming from on that. I guess here would be my hopeful response to that. And admittedly, this may just be wishful thinking on my part. But as the offense gets better, it seems like there are more opportunities for tight ends. Like, as Troy mentioned, the Peach Bowl provided that. I would say that the game against Missouri also provided that as well. Now, is this Georgia trying to be cute and just showcasing tight ends because they want a Rick Gilbert? It might be. I mean, I guess anything is possible. but also as Georgia's putting the ball in the air more and being successful at doing so, there's just more opportunities for everybody, tight ends included. So I understand, and I think that Troy's probably right about this, that certainly when Gilbert considered Georgia the first time around, he decided to disqualify Georgia from his recruitment because I don't think that Gilbert believed that Georgia would use him effectively. And unfortunately, in fact, Gilbert pretty much said as much. You can go back and read some of the things that Jeff Sintel has reported on that Gilbert was very skeptical of the Georgia offense the first time around. But I am hopeful, and I think there's some evidence to support this hope, that the Georgia offense is getting better, and therefore, Washington will be used more in the future. And if Gilbert were to come here, he'd be used more in the future as well. And when you have athletes the caliber of what Darnell is and what Arik Gilbert could be for Georgia, not only is Georgia more willing to throw to the tight end, but more willing to run the kind of passing plays where the tight end is a little bit higher up the progression chart, right? Where it's not for, when the phrase that Gilbert used about Georgia a couple a year or so ago when he was going through his recruitment was, I don't want to go to a place and just run what he called stick routes, the thing where you run 5 yards, turn around, and catch the football. Tight end at Georgia probably has been a little bit of a stick route position where, okay, this receiver goes here and this receiver goes here, and tight end, you run down there, turn around, and we'll throw it to you if we can't find anybody else to throw it to. And, that's not a very effective way to use tight ends, and a former tight end would certainly know that better than anybody else would. But when you have the athleticism of Gilbert, the athleticism of Washington, all of a sudden now it's not you're the fourth option on a stick route. All of a sudden now it's like, hey, we're going to look for you on a mismatch, or we may throw to you first. We may be looking to you, and then we'll go dump off to somebody else if we don't see you. The kinds of tight ends that Georgia bring in, could change the offensive philosophy. Randy Glass says, I don't see how they can use both Arik and Washington. Not enough targets there. Maybe not, but there are teams who are using multiple tight ends pretty well. I'll give you an example. Notre Dame uses multiple tight ends pretty well. They got Michael Meyer, who I think is a former very, very highly rated recruit, and they're throwing the ball to him. And really a lot this year. Do you guys remember Tommy Tremble, the former Georgia recruiting target, at least was kind of in the mix for Georgia for a while? Tremble's been on the field for Notre Dame a lot, and they've actually thrown to him a good bit too. So that's an example of a team that's thrown to multiple tight ends. Ohio State threw to multiple tight ends in the national championship game the other day. So, there are some teams who are throwing to multiple tight ends. Yeah, Troy Sadowski says seam routes, crossing routes, corner routes, down the middle, wheel routes. Notre Dame runs them well. Yeah, that's a team that really seems to use tight ends pretty well. And Chad Buchanan also says you can put Arik Gilbert in the slot. Yeah, that's the thing, too. It's like, if you compared Gilbert to a player on the Georgia roster, one of the guys he probably kind of compares to a little bit, Gilbert's a little bit like George Pickens, right? Big guy, they both kind of run that 40 and that sort of 4.7 range, maybe 4.6, 4.7 range. Gilbert from an athletic standpoint has got a little bit in common with George Pickens. Gerald Harmon says it'd be a defensive nightmare to have both Washington and Gilbert on the field together on one side of each other. And I think it would be, for sure. Pete Williams says +2 tight ends help with the running game as well, and I think that's true. Michael Webb making the Halloween reference from Michael Meyer. I like to see that there. Maurice Farmer says UGA doesn't have enough scholarships available to get every player y'all want. Well, that's probably true, but one thing I've also would say that you have to acknowledge about Kirby Smart is when it comes to managing the roster and figuring out, who you got room for and who you can add and how you can get the best 85 possible, I think that Smart has proven himself to be pretty adept at that. Zenti Allen says that George Pickens plays a lot faster than 4.7 speed, and that's probably true. We've seen this. I've grown up with this in football. Jerry Rice played faster than whatever his 40 time was, and Pickens playing faster than whatever his straight line speed probably is. I absolutely agree with you, Zenti. That's probably true. Judson McCurdy, I really agree with this, that UGA needs to run more of the rub routes, the kind of routes that scheme receivers open. The defense calls them pick plays. The offense calls them rub routes, but I think a well-timed rub route is really tough to defend. It's just really, really tough. Rob Phillips, thank you for the kind words. Drew Roman on Big Cat. I don't know that Georgia's got room for Big Cat, but But yeah, he's on his way out at Auburn. Let me go over to YouTube. I guess I haven't been on YouTube yet, and I apologize for that. Nature Gator says Gilbert been contacted by the Florida coaching staff. He says, I think Gilbert signs with Bama, Georgia, possibly Clemson. Yeah, I don't think I'd take Clemson seriously on this because Clemson just doesn't really take transfers, typically speaking. If it comes down to Alabama or Georgia, listen, here's one thing I'm going to acknowledge. Let's say the final three was Bama, Florida, and Georgia. There's no doubt that the other two schools can point to success with tight ends that Georgia can't really point to. I mean, Florida can say, look what Kyle Pitts did a year ago. And I know that Pitts has put on his own Instagram story some recruitment stuff for, Arik Gilbert. I think obviously Pitts would like for Arik Gilbert to follow in his footsteps at Florida. And even Alabama can say they've had more success with tight ends than Georgia can have. So if you're going to base this on recent track record, then obviously Gilbert would end up choosing somewhere else. But if you want to kind of base this on what the future looks like, then maybe at that point in time, Georgia can kind of get in there and get involved. And, frankly, when it came to Gilbert's recruitment the first time around, that was probably done with mixed results, right? I mean, Todd Hartley tried to sell him on, hey, the tight end position is going to change here, it's going to change here, and on the basis of the James Coley offense, that turned out not to be true. Maybe Gilbert's just not really willing to buy that from Georgia. It's at least a possibility. But my guess is that Georgia's in a better position to sell itself a year later than it was before. And, frankly, whether Gilbert chooses Georgia or not, the one thing I would advise him to be careful about is this. You chose LSU for the class of 2020 on the basis of that had been the hot offense in 2019. And, as it turns out, he's not happy there. I think it would be a very similar mistake to say, I'm going to go to Florida because Florida was the hot offense in 2020 with the way they were throwing the ball to Kyle Pitts. The chances of that also not working out so well with Kyle Trask no longer there and a lot of other guys missing off that offense, it could end up feeling like a similar mistake if Gilbert were to make a similar choice 2 years in a row. Let's see what else. Thomas Tyson on the notion that Zeus could return, and maybe kind of a lukewarm enthusiasm about that. Listen, here's what I'm going to say. If you go back and look, and I'm not promising you anything that's going to happen, but if you go back and look at Nick Chubb's performance in 2016, he only had 1,100 yards. He was a very good player against North Carolina and probably had some games in that 2016 season where maybe he left a little something to be desired. But Georgia was really glad to have him as a senior in 2017, and he punctuated his career in a huge way. I'm not saying the same thing works out for Zamir White in exactly the same fashion, but it's not easy to be as successful as Zamir White has been. Right now, Zamir is not in the category of DeAndre Swift or what Michelle was or Chubb was, certainly what Gurley was, recent Georgia running backs. Zamir's not quite in that category. But the idea that you would turn your nose up at the kind of success that Zamir has had, I'm not quite so sure I'm, willing to buy into that yet either. I mean, look, I understand where people are coming from when they say, I was kind of hoping Zamir would have had a little bit better year. I understand that. I understand where you're coming from on that. But there is something to be said for being good. Not great, but good. Sometimes good is good enough. And, if Zamir White does return to Georgia on this show, we will treat that as a good thing. I'm saying me. Y'all can express whatever opinion you want to. But my belief is a return to Georgia for Zamir White will be a good thing. Now, listen, that's not to say I don't want to see more of, Kenny McIntosh and Kendall Milton and, all those guys. Obviously, James Cook returning. There's a lot of guys to get involved in the Georgia offense. I do realize that. But Zamir does a lot right for Georgia, so I will certainly be happy if he does return. Tristan West says Zamir got better when the quarterback play got better, and that's probably true. That's probably well said by Tristan there. Bill McConnell says that Chubb is faster than White. He may very well be, but I'm not sure he was in 2016. Chubb, another year removed from injury, just was a better player in 2017. And, for Zamir, the same thing could be true as well. G. Grace Bama Boy says Chubb is unbelievable. He might be the best back in the NFL. I certainly am with G. Grace on that. What he did yesterday was phenomenal. And I really think, as crazy as it sounds, because obviously he's revered, I think that Chubb at Georgia is almost a little underrated at times. You know, I think for a lot of Georgia fans, they kind of viewed Michelle as the more spectacular player, a little more dynamic at times in some people's mind. But I think that underrates some of the things that Chubb did. I mean, if you go back and see the one touchdown that Chubb scored against Oklahoma, there's one in particular that I'm thinking of, where like I saw that there's like a great highlight of this, where it's like his body was like leaned way over me. It's like almost touching the ground. And it's just so hard to imagine that based on the way that, you know, freeze frame image looked, that he was going to shake off those defenders and then run onto the end zone. He had some spectacular plays at Georgia. He really did. All right, let's do one or two more. We're going to get ready to go. I'm not quite sure what y'all are arguing about on YouTube. I think I missed whatever that was. Gerald Harmon says that Chubb is a tough runner with both speed and power. Baracus Mills having some fun at my expense. I probably deserve that. Greg Childer says that Dejon Edwards is a heck of a running back also. Yeah, probably had a better freshman season than I anticipated him having, to be completely honest. Michael Webb, thanks for being here today. I appreciate that. Matt Rukavina on Kyle Trask's goatee. Mike Gay says the difference between a great running back and a good running back is in the blocking. There's a lot of truth in that. Brian Jones says in the Sporting News, early top 25, Georgia's number 5. By the way, talk about getting a jump on the way to early top 25s. Normally, the way too earlys come right after the national championship game. How about Sporting News not even waiting for the title game? 24/7 as well, Georgia at 4. Yeah, we'll have some fun with that kind of stuff. I love way too early top 25s. Robert Sharp also referencing McGriff's hire at Florida and how that can impact Terry and Arnold. Good question there. We kind of addressed that during the regular show. All right, we got to go. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate that as part of our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Let me also invite you to check out the AJC, our friends at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, AJC.com. Stay in touch with all your Atlanta news now. It's obviously, you know, a wild time in our world. And, of course, how all of this impacts Atlanta and the state of Georgia. You can read about that online at AJC.com. You know, also the ways in which the school system is dealing with the pandemic and everything else. That's also there for you at AJC.com. On the lighter side, very interesting stuff related to the world of sports. Probably not a good day yesterday for Titans OC Arthur Smith, who's been in the mix for the Falcons head coaching job. Falcons still looking for GM as well. You can read about that. Also, the very weird stuff that's gone on as of late between Trey Young and John Collins, the Atlanta Hawks. Hawks have been on a rough go lately. You can read about the Hawks trying to put these pieces back together online at AJC.com as well. Get your Atlanta news now at AJC.com, and you can just stay up to date on everything happening around the city of Atlanta. Thanks for being here on our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Certainly appreciate that. Make sure you reach out to our friends at R.S. Andrews when you have a air conditioning issue, which is probably more later on, but think about them for when you do. Heating issue, plumbing issue, electrical issue. If your water heater goes out, in many cases, R.S. Andrews can replace it for you the same day. You just need to find them online at rsandrews.com. You'll have a great day. See you back here tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. I'll look forward to talking to you then, everybody.